The second part of 5.1 is making sure you can solve equations. Now, on the review, we said without a calculator, but on the quiz and the test, you will be allowed to use a calculator on these. You just have to show your work. So here's what you need to make sure you know with equations. You always want to get whatever the base is, where it's raised to a power, by itself. So if it's already by itself, you're good. Once you get that by itself, you want to undo the power by taking the root. So if I see x minus 5 squared, to undo it, I want to take the square root. Now, if it's an even root that you're taking, you have to take plus or minus on that other side. So if it's an even root, square root, 4th root, 6th root, then you have to use plus or minus. So on this side, you're undoing the square. So when you take the square root of that, you're just left with whatever's underneath that radical. And then over here, I have to take plus or minus the square root of 121 is 11. It comes out evenly. Now you can use your calculator for that, even though it says without. On the quiz and test, you get to use a calculator. So just take the square root of 121. Then to undo this minus 5, we need to add 5. So here's where you have to be careful. You have x equals, because that goes away. Over here you have a positive 11 plus 5, and you have a negative 11 plus 5. So you have two different answers. So I know I have a positive 5, but it's a plus or minus an 11. So you want to make sure you give me those answers. So if I take 5 plus 11, I get 16. If I take 5 minus 11, I get negative 6. So there's two answers to that. So just make sure that plus or minus, you're just adding 5. So you're going to take 5 plus 11 for one answer and 5 minus 11 for the other answer. All right, if the base is not by itself, here's where a lot of you made a mistake. You need to make sure you get that by itself. So before you get started, you have to divide by 4. So you get x plus 1 cubed equals 8. Now to undo the cube, you take the cubed root. So you'll get x plus 1 over here. That's an odd power, so I don't have to use plus or minus. Cubed root of 8 is 2. And then I subtract the 1, I get x is 1. Okay, so all of these, because we had said you can't use the calculator, came out nicely. Now some on the quiz and test, some of them come out nicely, some of them don't. So with this one, again, you want to get this x to the 4th by itself. So the first thing you need to do is divide by 5. So after you divide by 5, x to the 4th equals 16. Take the 4th root. Again, it's an even root, so we have to take plus or minus on that side. So over here you get x, over here you get plus or minus. The 4th root of 16 is 2. And the last one that comes out nicely, again, you have this base, it's raised to the 3rd, so you're good to go. You're going to take the cubed root. So over here we have to take cubed root. It's an odd root. We don't need to worry about plus or minus. So here, when I take the cubed root, I'm left with what the base is, x minus 2, because again, this cubed root just undoes that raised to the 3rd power. Over here, the cubed root of 27 is 3. To undo x divided by 2, I need to multiply by 2, so I get x equals 6. Okay? So all of those come out nicely, but all of the equations are going to look the same. We're going to solve them the same way. So on the bottom of this review, they didn't come out nicely, but we're still going to do the same process. We want to get whatever's raised to a power by itself first. So instead of, or to undo this minus 7, I need to add 7. I first want to get that away from the variable. And then again, I still need to get this x to the 3rd by itself, so I need to divide by 4. I get x to the 3rd is 12. So now to undo that, I need to take the cubed root. So I need to take the cubed root of 12. So just to make sure you know how to do that on your calculator, if you want to do the cubed root is under math. So if you hit the math button, you should see this screen. Cubed root is right there. So I'm just going to go down to number 4, take the cubed root of 12. And I get, it does say to round to the nearest hundredth, so 2.29. I have to round that number to the nearest hundredth. So 2.29. Number 26, the base is already by itself, so all I need to do is take the 4th root but again, it's plus or minus because that's an even root. I'm going to get x plus 3. Now I have to take plus or minus the 4th root of 10. So to do the 4th root on your calculator, if you look under math, you should see this x root button. So before I can hit that button, I have to tell the root. So I'll get back out of here. I'm going to do the 4th root. So I type in a 4. I go to math, go down to the xth root. It's going to take the 4th root of, and I want to take the 4th root of 10. So that's how you do the 4th root. And I get 1.78, I would have to round that to. So x is about 1.78, plus or minus, remember. So now again, I have two answers. I'm going to have to subtract a 3. So I have a -3 and a plus and a minus 1.78. So now just on your calculator, take -3 plus 1.78. I think you get like -1.22. And -3 minus 1.78, you should get -4.78. So both of those answers work. So again, I already had the base by itself, took the 4th root of both sides, so I had to use plus or minus. Make sure you know how to put the 4th root of 10 on your calculator. And then I had to subtract 3, so to get my two answers, -3 plus that number and -3 minus that number. All right, when I look at number 27, this base is not by itself yet. So I need to divide by -5. So I get x plus 2 to the 4th equals -4. So now I'm going to take the 4th root, plus or minus the 4th root. So I get x plus 2. Now, on your calculator, when you try to take the 4th root, so I'm going to type 4. I'm going to do the x button, xth root of number 5, -4. What happens is I get an error message. It's a non-real answer. And let's think about that. When I want to take the 4th root of -4, I'm asking myself, what number times itself 4 times gives me -4? And I can't, if it's an even root, I can't take the even root of a negative. I'm starting to talk about imaginary answers. So with this, because it doesn't work, I have to say there's no solution. So if you ever try to take an even root of a negative number, it's like what you talked about when you did imaginaries. It can't happen. There is no real answer that works. All right, and then the last one has a little bit to do. We first have to get this base by itself. So we need to subtract 7. We have to divide by 4. Equals 7/2, I guess that comes to. If you want to write it as 3.5, you certainly can. And now again, I have to take the cubed root. So x minus 1 on this side. I have to take the cubed root of 3.5. So I'll go to math, down to the cubed root of 3.5, and I get 1.52. Again, I don't need to worry about plus or minus because it's an odd root. Then I just need to add 1. I get 2.52. And that's my answer. So with all of these, you really just have to make sure that you know to get the base by itself. That's where most people were going wrong. Get the base by itself. Once you have the base by itself, then to undo that power, you raise it to that root. You take the root of that power. So take the cubed root to undo a cube. Take a square root to undo a square. If it's an even root, you have to remember plus or minus to get your answer. And you'll get more than one answer at that point. Okay, so that's solving equations. That's the part of 5.1 where you got to use your calculator.